show is just dark. I mean, it's like dark, dark, dark. It's like black on black.
The approach to the series in general was to try and make it feel timeless. I wanted to go back to the comic books and really do a serious Batman show.
And it worked great, and it was just a show you wanted to watch again and again.
There was something about it that just punched you right in the face when you turned on the TV.
What made Batman the Animated Series just electrifying is that it was unlike anything else we'd ever seen on TV before, and that's what made it just so compelling.
The thing about the Batman Animated Series is that it took this world and it took it seriously without taking itself too seriously. So you had a world that you could believe in.
Early on, there were a lot of discussions about the direction of the series, and I would speak at length with Bruce about where he wanted the show to go and how he felt Batman should act and speak.
Initially, my own personal idea of Batman is quite a bit different than the way he is actually in Batman the Animated Series. Just the logistics of telling a story for television in a film medium. A lot of the ideas that I had for Batman I knew really wouldn't work for a cartoon.
What Bruce and I both found a meeting of the minds on once we got to know each other and we started talking about what we wanted to do with the series, we both were interested in telling real stories. Telling mini movies is the way we were referring to them at the time. We didn't want it to have a typical Saturday morning type approach to the show.
They really knew the comics industry, and they knew Batman's history, and they knew all of the different years and different styles that went into making these characters what they were, and that's why the Batman Animated Series works so well.
When I first saw Batman the Animated Series, it was groundbreaking. What it did, it captured a style and tone that was completely different from anything else that we've seen in cartoon at the time.
We call it Dark Deco. Dark Deco world with some computer technology going for it. It's just another dimension of a contemporary world.
In my mind, it was sort of like, what if the 1939 World's Fair had gone on another 60 years or so? And that cool sense of design and stylishness from the Art Deco years was in operation well up until the 90s. That way you could have kind of a rounded look to the cars and a stylish look to the buildings. You could have television and computers, but everything would have a black and white screen. You could believe that Batman could operate in a world that looked like that.
Eric Radomski was the architect of the architecture, so to speak. He was mostly, I think, involved with the backgrounds. One of his ideas was to create the backgrounds on black paper so that people were drawing with lighter materials on this dark surface so that it created a moody atmosphere.
As dark as I can do the show, this is the way I would play it. I'd love to have characters moving in and out of the shadows. At night, you only see elements, you fill in the gaps. Kind of the perfect approach to Gotham City.
In terms of Batman, the Animated Series, the image that pops into my head every time will be the very first thing I ever saw, which is that shadowy figure of Batman standing on the rooftop.
Somewhere along the way, they decided we don't really need a title to this thing. It's Batman.
Nobody was doing anything like that before. And actually incorporating the Warner Brothers logo was really very old world. It was really cool. It made the show feel like it belonged in another time.
And the greatest shot is when Batman just leaps onto one of them, and you don't even see what he did to the guy, but the guy's just out. Everything that you need to know about Batman is in that 30-second opening.
If you look at the main titles, there's no word that tells you it's Batman. We figured anybody in any language would be able to look at it and go, oh, it's Batman.
Bruce was very determined to tell the show as visually as possible, which was a challenge and a very bold direction.
It was kind of, guerrilla cartoon making to a degree, because we were just taking our skills and knowledge that we had accumulated, but at the same time willing to throw the rule book out if we thought that we could get a cool cinematic effect out of it or a good storytelling device.
As a writer, I was always looking for ways I could bring little flourishes or extra value to every scene or every episode. I remember in Heart of Ice, one thing I wrote in the script, it's a cool way to show off Mr. Freeze's powers. He had to get into a building, so he ran over to a fire hydrant, kicked it open with his big old metal boot, and shot his freezing gun into the water coming out, and that acted as this big frozen geyser lifted him up and put him in the building. Freeze! The thought process on Batman was great. Here, he's a character who doesn't talk much, which is as he should be. And I thought the more you can tell stories like that, the better the show is going to be.
You just feel a lot of responsibility about it because he is an institution. He's a special icon to a lot of people. You're not reinventing him. you're building on what he was and has been.
They went back to the core concepts of who Batman is. What was the motivation of the character? What were the things that mattered most to the character?
I've told Bruce and Paul from the beginning that I thought Batman is the real character and Bruce Wayne is the disguise. That's the face he puts on for the world. Batman is who he is in his heart.
I think there's a lot of different levels to appreciate the character. There's a fun, chummy pal thing with him and Robin that kids can latch onto when they're little. And there's also a dark, tragic aspect of it that as you get older, you start to understand, and it feels more realistic.
I think one of the things I loved about Batman the Animated Series is that you can see the first episode, you can see the 10th episode, you can see the 3rd season, and still walk in as a first-time viewer and feel like it's touching upon everything that you know true to be about Batman and the characters that he fights.
Who are you? I'm your worst nightmare.
Batman has, by far, the greatest collection of villains in all of comics.
Oops! Looks like we're experiencing technical difficulty. But don't worry, folks. We're still on the air.
So often the Joker has been played as sort of like a harmless clown or a total raving psychotic madman, which actually defeats the purpose of doing the character, because then he becomes totally unsavory.
He had these really demonic, scary eyes and this tooth-filled grin that looked like the Blue Meanies in Yellow Submarine.
With the Joker, I felt we struck a nice balance between the clown and the killer. We also got into his personality a lot and really made him kind of a scary character. And he was a character that you didn't get bored with seeing.
Sherlock Holmes has his Professor Moriarty. Batman has his Joker. That's why the Joker's endured for so long. Most people would just go out and commit the crime. He likes to announce that he's going to do things and challenge you to stop him.
It is to laugh, huh, Mr. J?
Harley Quinn, yeah, my favorite.
Hear, hear!
Paul was right in this episode where he just kind of had this weird idea. It's like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if one of the Joker's henchmen was a hench girl?
And then I just made her kind of a screwball who would say things with a goofy attitude, yet when the Joker called on her to pull a trigger, she could do it.
Harley Quinn was such a big hit. I mean, they've made toys and statues. They've incorporated her into the comic books. She has her own series. You know, I think Harley Quinn is a great foil for Joker.
I'm not an actor anymore. I'm not even a man.
I love the visuals of Clayface, and they did a terrific job with him. From being an actor to being this monster that can look like anybody, Clayface was really great.
All that dripping and all that, oh my gosh. It was a lot of hard work.
The transformation effects that they did on the Clayface character, they even went beyond what we had actually put on the board. I mean, we actually tried to throw in every trick we could think of at the time on how to make the shape-shifting look great. You know, they would have the head spin up and rotate and then morph into something else. To this day, that really stands out as like a real stellar piece of animation in Warner Brothers animation history.
Don't bother to adjust the picture. For the next 5 minutes, I'm in control.
Two-Face was the first character that we put our own stamp on. Fortunately, Alan Burnett came up with some really good psychological twists for the character that really had never really been seen before in the comics or elsewhere.
I actually consulted with psychologists to come up with a backstory that would be suitable for children's programs. I was interested in doing a show about a split personality who was already in trouble before he actually changed into Two-Face.
That whole play on the psychology of that character was really the most satisfying from the villain pool because, again, he was human and he had, he was torn. And that part of it was great fodder for good storytelling.
Harvey!
I've read every single Batman story ever published. I've listened to every radio show. I've seen every cartoon. I've read every book. And Heart of Ice is easily one of the best Batman stories ever told.
Since you ally yourself with my enemies, you leave me no choice.
My first script was the Mr. Freeze episode, Heart of Ice, and I had talked to Bruce about, hey, wouldn't it be cool to take the Mr. Freeze character in this direction? We had discussed the idea of a man with no emotions who had suffered a great tragedy, and that made him very cold.
Up until we got a hold of him in the Adam West show, he was obviously played kind of silly. He was always just kind of a generic, cold villain. He never really had any kind of psychological motivation or anything.
I guess it strikes a chord with me seeing that villain portrayed so sympathetically and seeing Batman try and understand that, and Mr. Freeze is almost more emotionally balanced than Batman is. It's really a cool dichotomy.
The best episodes of the animated series were moving because they were genuinely about characters and generally about emotions and generally about deep feelings, and they weren't just about people punching each other. And that's what made it a great show.
Now, the man who impersonated Bruce Wayne, I want his name.
They didn't just hire generic cartoon voice actors. Bruce and his crew set out to hire actors who happened to be in a cartoon show, and that made all the difference.
The name, now.
Some of the characters we filled fairly easily, and then some of the ones we kind of had to keep looking for because we just weren't hearing what we wanted to hear. And Batman himself, being the most important character in the series, was also, not surprisingly, the most difficult part to cast.
Last chance. Talk!
And then we had one of those fine casting moments where an actor walked into the studio. His name was Kevin Conroy, and he got in front of the microphone and he opened his mouth and he finished his audition, and the room of producers and writers and people sat together and said, "We are done."
The minute he opened up his mouth and started reading the Batman dialogue, his voice went down into that Batman voice.
I just went to a very dark and private place in my vocal range, because it seemed like such a dark, private world he lived in.
And we all just kind of went, "Whoa, I think we got him. I think we got our Batman."
He's good, but no actor is that good.
The directive always was, don't think of it as animation, just read it like you were acting in a play.
I'm sure all the folks at home will enjoy sharing this special occasion.
With the Joker, I imagined I was in a 1930s radio drama.
They told us from the first day of recording, forget cartoon sounds. We don't want any cartoon voices.
We cast a lot of actors who have what we call a voice with character, as opposed to an actor doing a cartoon voice. This is people who have either a recognizable sound or a quality to their voice that is special and identifiable.
More than familiar. It's identical.
One of the reasons why I remember the Grey Ghost story is because Adam West was the voice of the Grey Ghost.
You? Like you said, you need my help.
When we were casting the part for the Grey Ghost, somebody suggested Adam West. We should get Adam West to play the Grey Ghost. And we all just kind of went, yeah!
There was a great parallel story being told between Grey Ghost's origin and Batman's origin. And the fact that they had Adam West playing that role just gave it more meaning and more resonance for me, somebody especially who grew up on the original Batman TV show.
That's one of the things that really helped set the Batman show apart from other cartoons on at the time, was that the high caliber of the vocal performances.
I'll cancel Master Bruce's rendezvous with Bambi, was it, sir?
Yes, Alfred, do that.
Everybody was very impressed by the music that Danny Elfman had done for the first Batman movie, and we thought that was definitely the right direction to go, that kind of retro, noir, mysterioso kind of score. I'd remembered seeing a making of Batman documentary on TV, and I remember at the time being kind of surprised that Danny Elfman wasn't conducting the orchestra. Shirley Walker was conducting the orchestra, and I went, "Oh, who's this lady who's conducting the orchestra?"
And speaking with her, she totally respected what we were doing. She was very collaborative in terms of what we wanted to do with this, and we had hoped for something that would sound like a movie score. Again, in keeping with the whole idea of mini movies, and she just nailed it. We owe so much to her in terms of, again, keeping up this level of class for a show.
From day one, the very first time, we actually went to the recording stage to listen to the orchestra play one of our scores, or play one of Shirley's scores for our show. It was, the opening of the Man-Bat show. I can clearly remember it, those trombones going, dong. And it was like chills up and down our spines. We were just like, wow, we're really onto something. This sounds just awesome.
You didn't experience anything like this before. It's an animated show, half-hour format, and suddenly you're totally taken into the world. You feel like you've seen a movie. Every time you watch the show, it never ceased to satisfy.
When we got the first show back, animated from Japan on Leather Wings, Eric and I both just breathed a huge sigh of relief. And even without the score or the sound effects on it, we knew, we'd kind of struck gold.
We were so jazzed when we saw that first footage. We saw Batman doing Batman stuff, and it was so cool, and it worked so well.
It was so stylized. And at first, it took me a little while to get used to it because I looked at it and would say, boy, that's an awfully square jawline. Those ears are awfully pointy on Batman's costume. And then you watch 1, 2, 3 episodes and you realize that is absolutely right. It fits with the voices, it fits with the style. You hear that music and you see those images and it blew me away. I thought it was stunning.
I think that the show really did help to define the way people looked at Batman.
Batman the Animated Series as a touchstone of Batman history and as a clear marker in the Batman timeline is as prominent as anything, I think. Is going to be as important to Batman's history, perceived that way now and in the years to come, as important as the New Look Batman in the 60s or the Dick Sprang Batman in the 50s. It really was a touchstone that not just cartoon guys, but comic book creators themselves have been able to draw from since then, and that sensibility and that sense of giving Batman that darker edge and that timeless quality to him. It's very much an important marker in Batman's history.
The legacy of Batman the Animated Series is going to be that it raised the bar for the standard of animation.
I thought some of these early cartoons especially were so well written, so beautifully animated, such a wonderful gift to those of us who love the comic books.
The greatest thing about the Batman series, it pioneered it for so many other things. Without what all these guys did on Batman, we wouldn't have Justice League, we wouldn't have the Superman animated series, we wouldn't have the Teen Titans animated series. We want them to survive and thrive and grow and change, but at the same time, they have to keep their iconic status, and that's what these guys did.
Batman's character is going to be ongoing, so this is a nice chapter. I'm just pleased to have been part of that series.
You know, looking back on it, it was a pretty great time. It's hard for me not to idealize it as this sort of wonderful moment where we were all happy and blissfully doing our job and thinking, oh, we're making the Heart of Ice episode, we're making On Leather Wings, you know, we're making something great. It's like, no, we were guys doing jobs, and a really good one came along.
For my money, this is the quintessential Ultimate Batman because it incorporates all aspects of the history of Batman.
It was the turning point in careers for all of us. And that was pretty cool because I think threw a lot of the guys on the show back to when we were kids and the shows and the films that we'd seen and thought, you know, wow, that's great, I'd love to do that for a living, you know, what a cool job. Suddenly we were in that place, and to have people react to it and enjoy the same things that we were enjoying, that was the ultimate satisfaction.
In a way, our version of Batman is, I think, at least I've heard from a lot of people from, you know, who grew up watching the show, that's the Batman they think of when they think of Batman. It's like, oh yeah, that's, you know, the Batman the Animated Series is Batman to me. So it's neat to be a part of that legacy.